The wind howled like a wounded animal that night. Elena pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she sat by the fireplace, listening to the storm tear through the mountain village. She'd lived through many winters here, but this one felt different, angrier somehow. It was past midnight when she heard it, a sound that made her heart skip. Someone was pounding on her door, not knocking politely but banging desperately like their life depended on it. Elena froze. She lived alone now, had been alone for 3 years since her husband passed away. People in the village knew better than to bother the widow who kept to herself. So who could this be at such an hour, in such weather? The pounding came again, weaker this time. Then she heard something that made her move, a voice barely audible over the storm calling out for help. Her hands trembled as she approached the door. Every sensible thought told her to stay inside, to ignore it. But Elena had been a nurse for 20 years before she retired to this quiet life. That instinct, that deep need to help someone in pain was still stronger than her fear. She opened the door and immediately felt the full force of the storm. Snow and ice blasted into her warm house, and there, collapsed on her doorstep, was a man she'd never seen before. He was maybe in his mid-40s, his clothes soaked through and frozen in places. His lips were blue, his skin pale as death. He looked up at her with desperate eyes and tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. "Come in, I won't let you die," Elena heard herself say. The words came out automatically, the nurse in her taking over. She grabbed him under his arms and dragged him inside. He was heavy, mostly dead weight, and she wasn't as strong as she used to be. But somehow she managed to pull him across the threshold and kick the door shut behind them. The house fell quiet except for the crackling fire and the man's ragged breathing. Elena worked quickly, her training coming back to her like muscle memory. She pulled off his frozen jacket and boots, wrapped him in blankets, and positioned him near the fire. His body was shaking violently. Hypothermia, definitely. She needed to warm him slowly, carefully. Too fast and she could cause more harm. She heated water, prepared warm compresses, and checked his pulse. Weak but steady. As she worked, she noticed something odd. Even unconscious, even half-frozen and barely alive, the stranger's hand was clenched tight around something. A journal, old and worn, with a leather cover that had seen better days. She tried to pry it from his grip, thinking it would help him rest, but his fingers only tightened around it. "What's so important about this book?" she whispered to the unconscious man. Then she saw something else that made her breath catch. Around his neck, barely visible beneath his wet shirt, was a pendant. A small silver compass with intricate engravings on the back. Elena's hand went to her own neck, to the chain she always wore hidden beneath her clothes. She pulled it out and stared at the pendant hanging from it. An identical silver compass with the same engravings. Her husband had worn one just like it. He'd said it was from his research team, that they all had matching ones. A symbol of their bond, their shared purpose. She'd kept his after he died, wore it every day as a way to keep him close, but that team had disbanded years ago. After the accident that took her husband's life, they'd all gone their separate ways. She'd never met any of them, never even knew their names. Her husband had kept his work life separate, always traveling to distant places for his research. So why did this stranger have the same pendant? Elena sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. This man lying in her house, barely clinging to life, was connected to her husband somehow. Connected to the past she'd tried so hard to leave behind. The stranger stirred, muttering something in his fevered state. Elena leaned closer, trying to make out the words. The cave. Have to warn her. They're coming. Her blood ran cold. Warn who? Warn her? And who was coming? She touched his forehead. Still burning with fever despite the cold that had nearly killed him, she needed to focus on keeping him alive first. Questions could wait. Elena spent the entire night by his side, monitoring his condition, changing the warm compresses, making sure his breathing stayed steady. Outside, the storm raged on, as if the mountain itself was angry about something. By dawn, his shivering had stopped. His color was better. He was sleeping now, really sleeping. Not that dangerous half-conscious state from before. He would live. Elena finally allowed herself to sit down properly, exhaustion hitting her all at once. She looked at the stranger's face, really looked at it. He had a weathered appearance, like someone who'd spent years outdoors. His hands were rough, scarred. A working man, or maybe an explorer. The journal lay beside him where it had finally slipped from his grip. Elena knew she shouldn't look. It was wrong to invade someone's privacy like that. But the matching pendant, the fevered words, the way he'd appeared on her doorstep in the middle of a storm, nothing about this was normal. Her hand reached for the journal, then stopped. Not yet. When he woke up, she would ask him directly. She would look him in the eye and demand to know why he was here, how he knew her husband, and what he wanted from her. But even as she made this decision, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. A strange mixture of fear and, was it hope? The numb, quiet existence she'd built for herself since becoming a widow was cracking. This stranger had brought the past crashing back into her present. She looked out the window at the gray morning light struggling through the storm clouds. The village below was buried in snow, isolated from the rest of the world. No one would be going anywhere for days, which meant she was trapped here with this mysterious stranger. And he was trapped here with her. Elena touched the pendant around her neck one more time, feeling the familiar grooves of the engraving. Her husband had been dead for 3 years. She'd accepted it, mourned him, and moved on as best she could, but now, looking at this unconscious man with his matching pendant and his cryptic warnings, she wondered if everything she knew about her husband's death might be wrong. The stranger's eyes moved beneath his closed lids, dreaming or remembering something. His lips moved, forming silent words. Elena leaned in close, her ear near his mouth. "David," he whispered. "I promise, David." Elena's heart stopped. David was her husband's name. She sat back slowly, her whole world tilting. This was no accident. This stranger knew her husband, knew him well enough to make promises to him, and he'd come here, to her door, in the middle of a deadly storm. Whatever secrets he carried in that journal, whatever truth he'd come to tell her, Elena knew one thing for certain. Her quiet, peaceful life as a widow was over. The past had found her, and it had brought questions that demanded answers. The stranger finally opened his eyes on the second day. Elena was making soup when she heard him groan. She turned to find him trying to sit up, looking confused and disoriented. "Easy," she said, moving to his side. "You nearly died out there. Your body needs time to recover." He looked at her with clear blue eyes, studying her face like he was trying to memorize it. Then his hand shot to his chest, checking for the pendant. Relief washed over his face when he felt it there. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. "My home, in the mountain village of Pine Ridge. You collapsed on my doorstep 2 nights ago during the storm." Elena handed him a cup of warm broth. "Drink this slowly." He took the cup with shaking hands and sipped carefully. "Thank you. You saved my life. I'm a nurse." "Well, I was." Elena sat down across from him, keeping her distance. "What I want to know is why you were out in that storm, and how you ended up at my door specifically." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? It was hard to tell. "I'm a historian," he said after a pause. "I was researching the old settlements in this region. Got caught in the storm and saw your light. Pure luck, really." Elena didn't believe him. She'd interviewed enough patients over the years to know when someone was lying. But she didn't push. "Not yet. What's your name?" "Daniel. Daniel Chen." "I'm Elena. Elena Moretti." She watched his face carefully when she said her last name. There it was again, that flicker of recognition. "Italian family?" he asked, but she could tell he already knew the answer. "My husband was Italian. I took his name when we married." She stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, picking up one of the framed photographs. "He died 3 years ago." She brought the photo to Daniel and watched his face carefully. It was a picture of her husband at a dig site, wearing his work clothes and smiling at the camera. Young, handsome, full of life, Daniel stared at the photo for a long time. Too long for someone who'd never seen the face before. "I'm sorry for your loss," he finally said, handing the photo back. "Are you?" Elena's voice was sharper now. "Because you're looking at that picture like you recognize him." I just meant that it's always sad when someone dies young." Elena set the photo down and pulled out the pendant from beneath her shirt. "This belonged to my husband, part of a set given to his research team, and you're wearing the exact same one." Daniel's hand went to his chest instinctively. "So let's stop pretending this is a coincidence," Elena continued. "You knew my husband. You came here looking for me. The question is why?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him thinking, deciding how much to tell her. "You're right," he finally admitted. "I did know your husband. We worked together." "On his expedition?" Yes, Elena's heart was pounding now. The one where he died? Daniel nodded slowly. I was there. The room felt suddenly cold despite the fire. Elena sat down heavily, her legs weak. Tell me what happened. Tell me everything. I can't or won't. Both. Daniel looked genuinely pained. I made a promise. And keeping that promise is the only way to keep you safe. Safe from what? Elena's voice rose. My husband has been dead for 3 years. What could possibly threaten me now? Before Daniel could answer, he was hit by another wave of fever. His face went pale and sweat broke out on his forehead. He started shaking again. Elena's nurse instincts kicked in. She helped him lie back down, checked his temperature, and gave him medicine. We're not done talking about this, she said firmly. But first you need to rest. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Daniel had said. A promise, safety, what did it all mean? She found herself staring at the old photographs on her mantelpiece. She'd looked at them 1,000 times, but now she was seeing them differently. Her husband at various dig sites, always with that mysterious smile. Her husband with his compass pendant. Her husband who'd kept his work life so separate from their home life. She'd always thought he was just being professional, maintaining boundaries. But now she wondered if he'd been hiding something. Around 3 in the morning, she heard Daniel talking in his sleep. She moved closer to listen. July 16th. The coordinates were wrong. David found it first. We have to tell them. No, can't tell anyone. The cave, the people. Protect them. Elena grabbed a piece of paper and started writing down everything he said. Dates, fragments of sentences, anything that might be a clue. Then he said something that made her blood run cold. David's not dead. David chose to stay.
Had to tell Elena.
But they're watching. They'll use her to find him. Her hand froze. The pen fell from her fingers. David's not dead. It had to be fever talk. Delirium. The words of a sick man who didn't know what he was saying. But what if it wasn't? Elena spent the rest of the night going through old boxes she'd stored away. Her husband's belongings, things she couldn't bear to look at after he died. Letters, maps, research notes. She'd never really understood his work. Geology, archaeology, cultural preservation. It all seemed so complicated. Now she looked at everything with new eyes. The maps had markings she didn't understand. The notes mentioned the site and the discovery, but never said what or where. And there were gaps in the timeline, weeks where she didn't know where he'd been or what he'd been doing. When dawn came, Elena had more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Her husband had been involved in something big, something secret. And Daniel knew what it was. Over the next few days, Daniel's condition improved. He could walk around the house, eat solid food, and his fever was gone. But he remained evasive, changing the subject whenever Elena tried to ask about her husband. He was fascinated by her house, though. Constantly looking at the photographs, the old books on the shelf, the small mementos from her husband's travels. Once she caught him studying a picture of her and David on their wedding day. You both look so happy, he said quietly. We were. At least I thought we were. Elena sat down next to him. But I'm starting to realize I didn't really know him. Did I? Daniel looked at her with sad eyes. He loved you. That much I know for certain. Everything he did, every choice he made was because he loved you. Then why does it feel like he lied to me about everything? Because the truth was too dangerous to share. Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to shake Daniel until he told her everything. But she forced herself to stay calm. The fever, she said. When you were sick, you talked in your sleep. You said David wasn't dead. You said he chose to stay somewhere. Daniel's face went pale. Elena, is my husband alive? The question hung in the air between them. Daniel looked like he was in physical pain, torn between his promise and his conscience. I can't answer that, he finally said. But I can tell you this, your husband was the bravest man I ever knew. And yes, I came here to warn you. Because the people he was protecting you from, they've found a new lead. And that lead points to you. Elena felt dizzy. What do you mean? What people? Before Daniel could answer, they both heard it. The sound of car engines, multiple vehicles coming up the mountain road. In a remote village like this during winter, that was unusual. Very unusual. Daniel rushed to the window and looked out. His face went white. They're here, he said. We need to leave. Right now. Who's here? What are you talking about? Daniel grabbed his journal and started shoving things into his bag with frantic energy. The people I was running from. The ones who've been searching for your husband's discovery for 5 years. They followed me here. Elena looked out the window and saw 3 black SUVs pulling into the village square. Men in expensive coats were getting out, looking around, asking questions to the few villagers brave enough to be outside. "Elena, please," Daniel begged. "Trust me. If you want to know the truth about your husband, if you want to stay alive, we have to go now. Into the mountains." Elena looked at the strangers below, then at Daniel's desperate face, then at the photo of her husband on the mantelpiece. She'd spent 3 years in quiet mourning, accepting what she'd been told, never asking questions. But now the questions had found her, and running away wouldn't make them disappear. "If we run," she said slowly, "you'll tell me everything. Everything about my husband, about what happened to him, about what he discovered." "No more secrets," Daniel nodded. "If we survive this, I'll tell you everything. I promise." Elena took one last look at her peaceful, quiet home, the life she'd built as a widow, safe and predictable and numb. Then she grabbed her coat and followed Daniel out the back door, into the frozen wilderness. They made it to the tree line before Elena had to stop and catch her breath. She wasn't young anymore, and climbing through deep snow and freezing temperatures was harder than she'd expected. Daniel looked back at the village, worry clear on his face. "We can't stop yet," he urged. "They'll search every house. When they find yours empty, they'll know we ran. Just give me a minute," Elena gasped, her lungs burning from the cold air. They pressed on, following an old hunting trail Elena remembered from years ago when her husband would take walks in these woods. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was running through the same mountains where her husband had supposedly died, with a man who claimed to know the truth. It took them 3 hours to reach an abandoned hunting cabin Elena knew about. It was rough, with broken windows and a leaky roof, but it would hide them from view. Daniel immediately set about making a fire while Elena collapsed onto an old bench, exhausted. "How did you know about this place?" Daniel asked as he worked. "My husband and I used to hike out here sometimes, before he got too busy with work, before he started disappearing for months at a time." Elena's voice was bitter. Once the fire was going and they'd both warmed up a bit, Elena turned to face Daniel. "All right, we're here. We're safe for now. So start talking. Tell me about my husband." Daniel sat down, running his hands through his hair. He looked tired, like he'd been carrying a heavy weight for too long. "Where do you want me to start?" "Start with the expedition. The one where he supposedly died." Daniel nodded slowly. "It was 5 years ago. A geological survey team funded by a private company called Meridian Resources. There were 6 of us. Your husband was the team leader. I was the geologist. We also had archaeologists, a cultural anthropologist, and a medical specialist." "What were you looking for?" "Officially, mineral deposits. Copper, maybe silver. The company wanted to know if the mountain range was worth mining." Daniel paused. "But your husband had a different agenda." Elena leaned forward. "What do you mean?" David had heard stories from the local indigenous communities. Legends about hidden valleys, about people who disappeared into the mountains centuries ago and never came back. He thought there might be archaeological sites worth protecting. So he convinced the company to fund the expedition under the pretense of mineral surveys. But really, he wanted to find these lost communities. And did he? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his journal, the one he'd been clutching when Elena found him. "This is my record of everything that happened, everything we found." He held it out to her. "Maybe it's better if you read it yourself." Elena took the journal with trembling hands. The leather cover was worn smooth from years of handling. She opened it to the first page. The entries started normally enough. Dates, locations, technical observations about rock formations and soil samples. But as she flipped through the pages, the entries changed. They became more excited, more secretive. "July 12th, she read aloud. "David thinks he's found something. Won't tell the rest of us what yet. Says he needs to be sure first. He's been disappearing at night, coming back with mud on his clothes and this look in his eyes, like he's seen something amazing." She kept reading, her heart pounding. "July 16th. David told me everything tonight. He found a hidden entrance to a cave system. Inside there are signs of human habitation. Not recent, but not ancient either. Tools, fire pits, storage areas. Someone has been living in these mountains, completely hidden from the outside world. He wants to go deeper, but he's scared. Scared of what we'll find. Scared of what the company will do if they find out." Elena looked up at Daniel. "He found people?" "Living people." "Keep reading." Her hands shook as she turned the pages. The entries became more detailed, more urgent. July 20th, we went into the caves today, all of us, because David said we needed to see it to believe it. And he was right. Deep in the mountain, past chambers and tunnels that look natural but aren't, we found them. A community. Maybe 200 people living the way their ancestors did hundreds of years ago. They've been here for generations, hiding from the outside world. They speak an old dialect, practice ancient traditions. They don't want to be found. They don't want to be part of our modern world. July 22nd, the company is demanding results. They want to know if there are minerals worth extracting. The team is divided. Half of us want to tell the company about the people and leave them alone. The other half wants to report the mineral deposits and say nothing about the community. But David knows the truth. If we report the minerals, the company will send more teams. They'll find the people eventually. And when they do, everything these people have protected for centuries will be destroyed. Elena's vision blurred with tears. She could hear her husband's voice in these words, feel his passion for protecting cultures and heritage sites. July 25th, she continued. David has made a decision. He's not coming back with us. He's going to stay with the community. Help them remain hidden, protect them from discovery. He says it's the only way. If he disappears, if we report him as dead in an accident, the company will close the project. They'll never know what's really here. Elena stopped reading. Her hands were shaking too much to continue. He chose them over me, she whispered. No, Daniel said firmly. He chose to protect them. But leaving you destroyed him, Elena. I saw it. Those last few days before we left, he barely ate, barely slept. He wrote you letters he knew he could never send. He asked me to watch over you, to make sure you were okay. Then why didn't you? Why wait 3 years to come find me? Daniel's face was pained. Because David made me promise to stay away. He said the less contact anyone had with you, the safer you'd be. The company would be watching, waiting to see if anyone came looking for him. As long as you believed he was dead and moved on with your life, you were safe. So what changed?
Why come now?
Daniel stood up and paced the small cabin. Because 6 months ago, something happened. The company started digging into the old expedition records again. They found inconsistencies in our reports, things that didn't add up. They started tracking down the old team members, asking questions, offering money for information. And someone talked? Worse, one of our team members had kept his own journal. Notes about the strange things we saw, the evidence of hidden caves. He died last year, and his family sold his personal effects at an estate sale. Someone from Meridian bought the journal. They've been piecing it together ever since. Elena felt sick. So they know about the community? Not exactly. But they know something's there. Something valuable that we tried to hide. And they figured out that if anyone knows the full truth, it's you. David's widow, but I don't know anything. They don't know that. They think David might have told you before he left, or that he left you some kind of clue, some way to find him. Daniel looked at her seriously. That's why I came. To warn you. To help you understand what was coming. Elena stood up and walked to the broken window, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. Somewhere out there in some hidden valley, her husband was alive. Had been alive this whole time. Living with strangers while she mourned him, grieved him, rebuilt her life around his absence. Part of her wanted to hate him, but another part, the part that had loved him deeply, understood. This was exactly the kind of thing David would do. Choose principle over comfort. Choose protecting the vulnerable over his own happiness. There's more, isn't there? She asked without turning around. Something you're not telling me. Daniel was quiet for so long that Elena turned to look at him. The coordinates, he finally said. The exact location of the hidden valley. David thought he'd destroyed all records of it, but he was wrong. There's one place the information still exists. Where? Daniel looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. In a safety deposit box. In your name. At a bank in Denver. Elena's breath caught. What? David set it up before the expedition. He said it was just insurance in case something went wrong. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now I understand. He knew that if something ever happened to the community, if they were ever in real danger, someone would need to be able to find them. To help them. And he chose me. Why would he do that? Because he trusted you more than anyone in the world. Because he knew that if the time ever came, you would make the right choice. Daniel moved closer. Elena, those people from Meridian, they've probably already figured this out. They're not just looking for you to ask questions. They're looking for that key to the safety deposit box. If they find it, they find the coordinates. And if they find the coordinates, They find the community. They find David. And they'll destroy everything he gave up his life to protect. Elena sat back down heavily, her mind reeling. A safety deposit box in her name. Coordinates to a hidden valley. Her supposedly dead husband living with a secret community. And a corporation willing to do anything to find them. I don't have a key, she said. David never gave me anything like that. Are you sure? Think carefully. Did he give you anything before he left? Anything unusual? Elena thought back 5 years. Her husband's last day at home before the expedition. They'd had breakfast together, talked about ordinary things. He'd kissed her goodbye at the door, held her a little longer than usual. She'd thought he was just being sentimental. Had he given her anything? They stayed in the cabin for 2 days, waiting for the search in the village to die down. Daniel used the time to tell Elena everything he'd been holding back. And with each story, each detail, Elena learned more about the husband she thought she'd known. David wasn't just protecting a random community, Daniel explained one evening as they sat by the fire. These people, they're descendants of a group that fled into the mountains over 300 years ago. They were escaping persecution, religious conflicts, wars. They found these caves and built a life completely separate from the outside world. But how did they survive?
How did no one find them?
The valley where they live, it's almost impossible to reach unless you know the exact path. The mountains form a natural barrier, and the entrance to the cave system looks like just another rock face unless you know what to look for. They're completely self-sufficient. They grow food, raise animals, have their own water source. Everything they need is within their hidden valley. Elena tried to imagine it. A whole community living like time had stopped centuries ago while the modern world moved on without them. David spent weeks with them before making his decision. Daniel continued, learning their language, understanding their culture. They're not primitive, Elena. They're highly educated in their own way. They have a complex society. Art, music, stories passed down through generations. They chose this life. They want to stay hidden, and David respected that choice. More than that, he fell in love with their way of life. He said they'd achieved something our modern world had lost. True community, real connection, harmony with nature. He would sit by the fire at night and talk about how peaceful he felt there, how right it seemed. Elena felt a pang in her chest. More right than being with me? Daniel looked at her with sad eyes. That's what tore him apart. He loved you, Elena, but he also felt this calling, this purpose. He believed he was the only one who could protect these people. And he was probably right. Why him specifically? Because he was the team leader. He knew all the details of our mission. He knew what the company would do if they found out about the community. They'd claim mineral rights, force the people out, probably study them like specimens. David couldn't let that happen. Elena stood and paced the small cabin. So he just decided to die? To let me think I'd lost him forever? Didn't he think about what that would do to me? Every single day. Daniel pulled out the journal again and flipped to a section near the middle. Read this. It's from his last night before we left. Elena took the journal reluctantly. The entry was dated July 28th, 5 years ago. I watched her sleep this morning before I left. She read aloud, her voice shaking. Memorized every detail of her face because I knew it would be the last time. She had no idea I was saying goodbye forever. How do you tell someone you love that you're choosing to leave them? That you're choosing something else over them? You don't. You can't. So I'm taking the coward's way out. I'm letting her think I died, that it was an accident, that I had no choice. It's a lie, but it's a kinder lie than the truth. She'll grieve, but she'll heal. She'll build a new life. Maybe she'll find someone else to love. Someone who can give her the normal, stable life she deserves. And I'll live with the knowledge that I broke her heart to save a people she's never met. I hope someday she can forgive me, even though she'll never know there's anything to forgive. Elena's tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. She closed the journal and handed it back to Daniel. He was wrong, she said quietly. I didn't heal. I didn't build a new life. I just existed, went through the motions. Pretended everything was fine while feeling hollow inside. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. They were quiet for a while, listening to the wind howl outside. Finally, Elena broke the silence. Tell me about the day you left, the day you all came back without him. Daniel's face was heavy with old guilt. We staged an accident. Made it look like David had fallen during a climb, that we couldn't recover his body. We each practiced our stories until we could tell them without hesitation. Then we hiked back to base camp and called for evacuation. Who made the phone call to me? The company representative. They handled all the family notifications. I wanted to call you myself, but David made me promise not to. He said hearing my voice, someone who'd been there, might make you ask too many questions. Elena remembered that call. The impersonal voice telling her that her husband was gone, that there'd been an accident, that they were sorry for her loss. She'd collapsed right there in the kitchen, the phone still in her hand. The funeral was the hardest thing I've ever done, she said. Standing there staring at an empty coffin, listening to people talk about what a great man David was, how tragic it all was. And the whole time I kept thinking that something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like a lie. That's because it was a lie, and we all had to live with it. What happened to the rest of the team? We scattered. Some felt guilty, others felt like they'd done the right thing. The anthropologist moved to South America, last I heard. The archaeologist started teaching at a university. The medical specialist retired. We all made a pact never to contact each other, never to speak about what really happened. But you broke that pact. Because the situation changed, because you were in danger, and because— Daniel paused. Because carrying the secret for 5 years has been eating me alive. I watched my best friend fake his own death. I lied to his wife. I helped to destroy your life to save people you didn't even know existed. That kind of guilt doesn't fade. Elena looked at him more carefully. She could see the toll it had taken. The lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders seemed permanently hunched like he was carrying a physical weight. Do you regret it? Helping him? Daniel thought about that for a long time. I regret the pain it caused you. But do I regret helping David protect that community? No, if you could see them, Elena, you'd understand. They're special. They represent something pure, something untouched by all our modern corruption and greed. They deserve to exist on their own terms. Even if it cost them their lives to do it? Even if it meant abandoning the people they loved? David didn't abandon you. In his mind, he was protecting you. If you'd known the truth, you would have been complicit. You could have been charged with fraud, conspiracy. The company would have come after you for answers. By keeping you in the dark, by making you a genuine widow, he kept you safe. Elena laughed bitterly. Safe and miserable. Better miserable than dead, she couldn't argue with that. Especially now, knowing that people were actually hunting for this information, willing to do who knows what to get it. Tell me about David now, she said. Is he happy there? Has he made a life? Daniel's expression became uncomfortable. I don't know. I haven't had contact with him since we left. That was part of the plan. Complete separation. No way to trace him. No way to accidentally reveal his location. So he could be dead after all. Really dead this time. No, I'd know. I'd feel it somehow. Daniel sounded more hopeful than certain. You said he was your best friend. That must have been hard, losing him like that. It was like attending my own brother's funeral while he stood there watching. Invisible. Part of me wanted to grab him and drag him back to civilization. Make him face his responsibilities. But another part of me admired him. He had the courage to give up everything for what he believed in. How many people can say that? Elena moved to the window and looked out at the dark mountains. Somewhere out there, David was living a completely different life. Maybe he thought about her sometimes, wondered how she was doing, or maybe he'd moved on completely, embraced his new identity so fully that his old life felt like a dream. When we find him, she said slowly, I don't know how I'll react. Part of me wants to hug him. Part of me wants to hit him. Part of me wants to just walk away and pretend I never learned the truth. All of those reactions would be valid. Will he want to see me, do you think? Daniel came to stand beside her. Elena, finding that valley isn't going to be easy. The terrain is dangerous, the weather unpredictable, and we'll have to do it while avoiding the people looking for us. But if we make it, if we actually find David, yes, I think he'll want to see you. In fact, I think seeing you again is probably something he's dreamed about every day for 5 years. Then why doesn't he just come back? Because he can't. If he comes back, he has to explain where he's been. And if he explains, the community gets exposed. He's trapped himself, Elena. He made a choice he can never take back. Elena turned to Daniel. But we can take it back for him. If we get those coordinates, if we make sure no one else can find the valley, maybe he could come home. Daniel shook his head sadly. It's not that simple. The community trusts him. They've built their safety around his presence, his protection. If he left now, they'd be vulnerable again. So what are you saying? That even if we find him, I can't have him back? I'm saying that the David you knew, your husband who lived in a house and had a normal job and came home to you at night, that David is gone. The man living in those mountains is someone different now, changed by 5 years of living completely off the grid, by the weight of his choice, by the life he's built there. Elena felt something break inside her. She'd been holding on to hope, she realized. The journey to Denver took 3 days. They couldn't risk flying or taking a direct bus route, so they traveled in stages, using back roads in small towns where nobody asked questions. Daniel had some cash saved up, enough to keep them moving without leaving a credit card trail. Elena had never been on the run before. It felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Every time a car followed them for too long, every time someone looked at them twice, her heart would race. Was it just paranoia, or were they really being watched? They reached Denver on a Tuesday morning. The city felt overwhelming after weeks of quiet mountain life. Too many people, too much noise, too many places for danger to hide. The bank was downtown, a large stone building that looked like it had been standing for 100 years. Elena clutched her purse tighter, feeling the weight of the pendant and key inside. "Remember," Daniel said as they approached, "act natural. You're just a widow checking on her late husband's affairs. Nothing unusual about that." But Elena's hands were shaking as they walked through the heavy doors. A security guard nodded at them. A teller smiled and asked if she could help. Everything seemed normal, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "I need to access a safety deposit box," Elena told the woman at the desk. "It should be under my name." "Elena Moretti," the woman typed on her computer, then smiled. "Yes, I see it here. Box 347. May I see your identification and the key?" Elena provided her driver's license and pulled out the tiny key from the pendant. The woman examined both, made some notes, then stood. "Right this way, please." They were led to a private room filled with rows of metal boxes. The woman used her master key along with Elena's key to open box 347, then excused herself to give them privacy. Elena stared at the long metal drawer, afraid to pull it out. Whatever was inside had been sitting here for 5 years, waiting for this moment. "Do you want me to do it?" Daniel asked gently. Elena shook her head. This was something she needed to do herself. She pulled the drawer out slowly. Inside was a manila envelope, thick and sealed. Her name was written on the front in David's handwriting. Just seeing those familiar loops and curves made her eyes sting with tears. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside were several items: a letter addressed to her, a set of detailed maps with coordinates marked, and a small USB drive. "Open the letter first," Daniel suggested. Elena unfolded the pages. David's handwriting filled them, and she could almost hear his voice as she read. "My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong. Either I've been discovered, or the community I'm protecting is in danger, or someone has figured out what I did. I pray this letter stays sealed in this box forever, but if it doesn't, if circumstances have forced you to find it, then you deserve to know everything. I'm alive, or at least I was when I wrote this 5 years ago. I'm living in a hidden valley with a community of people who fled the world centuries ago. I chose to stay with them to help protect their secret, and in doing so, I chose to leave you. There's no way to explain this that makes it okay. There's no justification that erases the pain I know I've caused you. But I want you to understand why. These people, Elena, they're remarkable. They've preserved a way of life that the modern world would destroy in a heartbeat. They're peaceful, wise, and completely vulnerable to the greed of corporations and governments. If their location becomes known, they'll lose everything. They'll become a spectacle, a tourist attraction, or worse, they'll be forced off their land for resource extraction. I couldn't let that happen, and I was the only one in a position to stop it. By staying with them, by becoming one of them, I ensured that the outside world would never find them through me. The maps in this envelope show the location of the valley. I'm trusting you with this information because I know that if you've been forced to seek it out, then my worst fears have come true. Someone is looking for this place, and you're the only person I trust to make the right decision about what to do with this knowledge. Don't come looking for me, Elena. Please. I'm not the man you married anymore. That man died 5 years ago, and in his place is someone who belongs to a different world now. But if the community is in danger, if there's no other choice, then use these maps to find them. Help them. Protect them the way I've tried to do. I loved you. I still love you. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, every choice I made was to keep you safe and to protect something beautiful in this world. I hope someday you can forgive me even though I don't deserve it. David. Elena's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the letter. Tears streamed down her face. She'd wanted answers, and now she had them, but they hurt more than the not knowing ever did. Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. Elena, I'm sorry. He loved me, she said through her tears. But not enough. Not enough to choose me, that's not fair. He chose to protect hundreds of innocent people. And in doing so, he destroyed one innocent person. Me. Elena wiped her eyes angrily. I'm not saying what he did wasn't noble, but it was also cruel. He could have told me. He could have trusted me with the truth. And put you in danger. Elena, think about what's happening right now. We're being hunted. If you'd known the truth 5 years ago, this would have started then. You could have been hurt or killed. Elena knew he was right, but it didn't make the pain any less. She looked at the maps, trying to focus on something concrete. The coordinates marked a location deep in the mountain range, at least a 3-day hike from the nearest road. This is where he is? That's where the valley is. Where he was 5 years ago. Whether he's still there? Daniel trailed off. Elena was about to respond when her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor in the village. Strange men asking about you. Said they were from your husband's old company. Seemed aggressive. Wanted to know where you went. I didn't tell them anything, but be careful. Her blood ran cold. They're looking for us actively now. They've been to the village. Daniel's face went pale. We need to leave now. They quickly put everything back in the envelope. Elena kept the letter and maps but left the USB drive, unsure what was on it and not having time to check. They thanked the bank employee and walked out as calmly as they could manage. On the street, Elena scanned the crowd nervously. Too many people. Too many potential threats. There's a coffee shop around the corner, Daniel said. We can plan our next move. But as they turned the corner, Elena saw them. 2 men in dark suits standing by a black SUV watching the bank entrance. They hadn't spotted Elena and Daniel yet, but it was only a matter of time. Don't look, Daniel whispered, pulling her in the opposite direction. Walk normally, like we're just tourists. They made it half a block before Elena heard a shout behind them. The men had spotted them. Run, Daniel said. They took off through the crowded downtown streets. Elena's heart pounded as she dodged pedestrians and street vendors. She heard footsteps behind them, getting closer. Her lungs burned. She wasn't young, wasn't in shape for this kind of chase. Daniel pulled her into an alley, then through a door into a busy restaurant kitchen. The staff shouted in confusion as they ran past out another door into a loading area behind the building. In here, Daniel said, pulling open the back of a delivery truck. They climbed in just as their pursuers rounded the corner. Daniel pulled the door closed quietly, leaving just a crack to see through. They held their breath as the 2 men ran past, looking around frantically. After a few minutes, the men got on their phones, calling for backup, probably. We can't stay in the city, Elena whispered. They'll have people everywhere. I know. We need to get to the mountains. It's the only place we might lose them. But we need supplies. Camping gear, warm clothes, food. We can't just walk into the wilderness unprepared. Daniel thought for a moment. I have a friend. Lives about 2 hours outside the city. He owes me a favor. He can help. They waited in the truck for another 20 minutes until they were sure the coast was clear, then slipped out and made their way to a bus station. Daniel paid cash for tickets to a small town called Ridgeway. On the bus, Elena finally allowed herself to look at the maps again. The route to the hidden valley was complex, winding through terrain that looked dangerous even on paper. There were notes in David's handwriting about landmarks to watch for, dangers to avoid, the best times of year to attempt the journey. He documented everything, she said quietly, like he knew someone would need to follow him someday. David was always thorough. It's one of the things that made him a good researcher. And a good liar, apparently. Daniel didn't respond to that. What could he say? David had lied to everyone, maintained that lie for years, and now Elena and Daniel were paying the price. The bus ride felt endless. Elena kept checking over her shoulder, expecting to see those men in suits sitting behind them. But they seemed to have escaped, at least for now. Daniel's friend, a man named Robert, who looked like he'd spent his whole life outdoors, didn't ask many questions. Daniel explained that they needed camping gear and supplies for a week-long trek into the mountains. and Robert just nodded and started pulling items from his garage. "Weather's not great for hiking right now," Robert commented as he loaded a backpack with supplies. "Storm system moving in tomorrow. Could get nasty up there." They started the hike at dawn. Robert drove them to the trailhead, a remote spot marked only by a worn wooden post with faded paint. The mountains stretched before them, massive and indifferent, peaks disappearing into low clouds. 3 days. To reach the coordinates, Daniel said, checking the maps one more time. Maybe 4 if the weather turns bad. Elena adjusted her backpack, feeling the weight of supplies pressing on her shoulders. She hadn't done serious hiking in years. Her body was already protesting, and they hadn't even started yet. "You sure about this?" Robert asked her. Not too late to turn back. Elena looked at the mountains, then at the maps in Daniel's hands. Somewhere up there was the truth she'd been searching for. Somewhere up there was David. "I'm sure." Robert nodded, respect in his eyes. "Good luck then. And remember, if you need rescue, that emergency beacon will bring help. Don't be too proud to use it." The first day was harder than Elena expected. The trail was steep and rocky, barely visible in places. Daniel had to help her over rough sections, his hand steady and patient. By midday, her legs were shaking and her lungs burned from the thin mountain air. "We can rest," Daniel offered, seeing her struggle. "No, we keep moving. Those people from Meridian, they won't rest. They'll figure out where we went eventually. They won't be able to track us in the wilderness. We're off all the tourist trails now." But Elena wasn't so sure. These people had resources, connections, determination. If they wanted to find her badly enough, they would. They hiked until the sun started setting, then made camp in a sheltered spot between 2 large boulders. Daniel set up the tent while Elena filtered water from a nearby stream. The water was so cold it made her teeth ache. That night, sitting by their small fire, Daniel started telling her more about the expedition, about the days leading up to David's decision. "He was different when he found that community," Daniel said, staring into the flames. "Like he'd discovered something he'd been searching for his whole life. He'd come back from the valley with this light in his eyes, talking about how pure it all was, how uncomplicated, how they lived with purpose and meaning. He had purpose with me, we had a life together. I know, and I think part of him knew he was making a terrible choice. But he felt called to it, Elena. Like some people feel called to be doctors or teachers. He felt called to protect those people." Elena pulled her jacket tighter. "Tell me what he was like. Those last days before you all left." Daniel was quiet for a while. Sad, determined. He barely slept. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find him sitting outside the tent staring at the stars. One night I asked him what he was thinking about. He said he was trying to memorize everything about his old life before he let it go forever. Did he mention me? All the time. He told stories about you, about how you met, about your wedding day, about quiet mornings drinking coffee together. He was saying goodbye, I realize now, working through his grief while you were still alive, still waiting for him at home. Elena felt tears on her cheeks, but didn't wipe them away. I wish he'd told me, given me a chance to say goodbye too. Would you have let him go if he had? No. I would have fought for him. For us. That's why he couldn't tell you. Because you would have made him question his choice. And he was barely holding on to his conviction as it was. They were silent for a long time, watching the fire slowly die down. In the distance, an animal howled. The sound was lonely and wild, echoing across the dark mountains. The second day was even harder. The trail disappeared completely in some sections, and they had to rely entirely on David's maps and Daniel's compass. The terrain became rocky and dangerous with steep drops on either side of narrow ridges. Are you sure we're going the right way? Elena asked, looking around at the unfamiliar landscape. Daniel checked the maps again. According to David's notes, we need to pass through this section to reach the hidden entrance. It's deliberately difficult to access. That's what's kept the valley secret for so long. Around noon, it started to rain. Not a gentle drizzle, but a harsh, cold rain that soaked through their jackets within minutes. The rocks became slippery, every step treacherous. We should stop, Daniel said. Wait out the storm. But Elena kept walking. She was driven by something she couldn't quite name. Anger maybe, or determination, or just the need to finally reach the end of this journey. They were crossing a narrow ledge when Elena's foot slipped. She felt herself falling, saw the drop below, and for one terrifying moment thought she was going to die on the same mountains that had supposedly claimed her husband. Then Daniel's hand grabbed her arm, pulling her back. They both fell onto the ledge, breathing hard. That's it, Daniel said firmly. We're stopping. You're exhausted and we're both going to get killed if we keep pushing like this. They found a small cave and set up camp inside, out of the rain. Elena's hands were shaking, partly from cold and partly from the adrenaline of almost falling. Daniel made hot tea on the portable stove and the warm cup felt like a blessing. Thank you, Elena said quietly, for saving me. Again. David would never forgive me if I let something happen to you. David doesn't get to have opinions about what happens to me, not after what he did. Daniel looked at her carefully. You're angry. Of course I'm angry. I'm furious. I'm heartbroken. I'm confused. Elena's voice rose. I don't know whether to hug him or hit him when I see him. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't even know if I want to forgive him. Those are all valid feelings. But underneath all of that, I still love him. And that's what makes this so hard. Because he destroyed me, Daniel. He destroyed our life together. And I still love him anyway. The rain continued throughout the night. Elena lay in her sleeping bag listening to the water drum against the rocks outside. She thought about David, wondered if he was somewhere nearby, if he ever looked toward the outside world and thought about her. Daniel had said the man in the valley wasn't the same man who'd left 5 years ago. But was she the same woman? The old Elena would have been content with the simple life she'd built as a widow. But this new Elena, the one who'd discovered the truth, who'd run from corporate agents, who'd climbed mountains in search of answers, she was someone different too. Maybe they were both changed. Maybe there was no going back for either of them. On the third day, the rain stopped, but the clouds remained low and heavy. They pushed forward, climbing higher into the mountains. The air was thinner here, each breath requiring more effort. We're close, Daniel said, checking the coordinates. According to the map, the entrance should be within a few miles. Elena felt her heart rate increase. After everything, they were almost there. They rounded a bend and found themselves at the base of a massive rock face. It looked completely solid. No obvious caves or openings anywhere. This can't be right, Elena said, disappointment crushing her. There's nothing here. But Daniel was reading David's notes carefully. No, this is it, look here. He pointed to a specific spot on the rock face. David wrote that you have to approach from exactly the right angle. The entrance is disguised by the way the rocks overlap. They moved to the position indicated on the map, and suddenly Elena saw it. What had looked like solid rock was actually a narrow gap, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. You'd walk past it 100 times and never notice it unless you knew exactly where to look. That's incredible, Elena whispered. That's survival, Daniel replied. They've hidden themselves perfectly. They approached the entrance cautiously. Beyond the narrow gap was darkness, a tunnel leading into the mountain. Daniel pulled out a flashlight. Once we go in, he said seriously, there's no turning back. We'll be committed. Are you ready? Elena thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The storm, the stranger on her doorstep, the journal, the chase, the mountains. It had all led here, to this hidden entrance in the rock. I'm ready. They squeezed through the gap and into the tunnel. It was tight at first, claustrophobic, but after about 20 feet it opened up into a larger passage. The tunnel sloped downward, winding deep into the mountain. They walked for what felt like hours in the darkness, their flashlights creating dancing shadows on the rock walls. Elena tried not to think about all the tons of stone above them, tried not to imagine what would happen if there was a collapse. Then gradually, she noticed something. Light ahead. Not flashlight light, but natural light, pale and gray. The tunnel opened up, and they emerged into something Elena couldn't quite believe. A valley, hidden completely within the ring of mountains, invisible from the outside world. It was beautiful, a perfect circle of green surrounded by towering peaks. There was a stream running through it, fields that had been cultivated, and in the distance she could see structures, houses made of stone and wood, built in a style that looked ancient, and there were people, dozens of them, maybe more, going about their daily tasks. Some were working in the fields, others were near the stream. Children played in an open area. It looked peaceful, timeless, like a scene from another century. My God, Elena breathed. It's real. It's all real. Daniel stood beside her, equally amazed. I knew it was here, but seeing it again, it's still incredible. As they stood there watching, a figure emerged from one of the houses. A man. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the middle of the valley while curious villagers watched. Finally, David pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, looking at her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. I don't understand, he said. How did you find this place? Why would you? Because you're an idiot, Elena said through her tears. Because Daniel showed up half dead on my doorstep with that journal. Because people are hunting for this place. Because I spent 3 years mourning you and I deserve to know the truth. David's face went pale. People are hunting? What people? Meridian Resources. They've been piecing together what happened 5 years ago. They know something's hidden out here and they're desperate to find it. Daniel had caught up to them now. When David saw him, his expression shifted from shock to something harder. You brought her here? You were supposed to keep her safe. She was in danger, Daniel shot back. They were going to use her to find you whether she knew where you were or not. At least this way she knows the truth. The three of them were surrounded now by community members, all keeping a respectful distance but clearly concerned. An older woman stepped forward, her face kind but worried. David, who are these people? David ran his hand through his hair, looking overwhelmed. This is Elena, my wife from before, and Daniel from the expedition. The woman's eyes widened. Your wife? But you said, I know what I said. David looked miserable. Can we go somewhere private? We need to talk. They were led to David's house, a small stone structure with simple furniture and woven mats on the floor. It looked nothing like the home they'd shared before, yet Elena could see touches of David everywhere. Books stacked neatly on a shelf, a sketching pad with drawings of the valley, a compass identical to the one she wore around her neck. You live here? Elena said, looking around. It wasn't a question. Yes, for 5 years. Are you married? To someone here? The question hurt to ask, but she needed to know. No, I couldn't. You're still... David stopped, closed his eyes. You were always my wife. Even though I left, even though I made you think I was dead, I couldn't let go of that. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Relief mixed with anger, love mixed with pain. They sat down and David made tea using a small clay pot over a fire. His movements were practiced, comfortable. He'd built a whole life here without her. Tell me everything, Elena said. From the beginning. Why you really stayed. David was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. When I first found this place, I thought I was discovering an archaeological site. Evidence of historical habitation. I was excited from a research perspective. But then I realized people were still here, still living the way their ancestors had for 300 years. Daniel told me some of this. Then you know they fled here to escape persecution. Religious conflicts, wars, forced conversions. They found this valley and decided to disappear completely from the world. And it worked. For centuries, no one found them. Until you did. Until I did. And I realized that if I reported what I'd found, everything would change for them. Meridian would want the mineral rights. The government would want to study them. Tourists would come. Media. Their whole way of life would be destroyed within a year. Elena watched his face as he spoke. She could see the passion there. The conviction. This wasn't just a job for him. It had become his purpose. I tried to find another way, David continued. I spent weeks thinking about it. Could we get them legal protections? Set up a preserve? But every option required revealing their location. And once that location was known, the vultures would circle. People who wanted to exploit them, study them, profit from them. So you decided to die. I decided to stay, to become their guardian, to be the barrier between them and the outside world. David looked at her with desperate eyes. Elena, you have to understand. These people, They're not just living in the past. They've chosen a way of life that has meaning, purpose, community. They don't have the problems we have in the modern world. No addiction, no depression, no loneliness. Everyone has a place, a role, a reason to be. And you found your place here. Your reason to be? Yes, I teach the children. I help with agriculture. I use my knowledge to solve problems while respecting their traditions. I've become part of something bigger than myself. Elena stood and walked to the window, looking out at the valley. Children were playing a game with sticks and a ball. Women were preparing food together, laughing. Men were building something, working as a team. It did look peaceful. It looked like something from a better time. I'm happy for you, she said, and part of her meant it. You found what you were looking for. But what about what I lost? What about the life we had together? David came to stand beside her. I think about you every single day. I wonder if you're okay. If you've found happiness, if you've moved on. I hope you have, even though the thought of you with someone else kills me. I haven't moved on. I haven't found anyone else. I've just been existing, David. Going through the motions. Pretending to be okay while feeling empty inside. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. They stood there in silence until Daniel cleared his throat. As touching as this is, we have a bigger problem. If Meridian figures out where Elena went, they'll send people into these mountains. And eventually, they'll find this valley. David's face hardened. Then we need to make sure they never get that chance. How? Elena asked. They have resources, money, technology. How do we stop them? We destroy the evidence. The maps, the coordinates, anything that could lead them here. David, I have your maps. The ones from the safety deposit box. They're detailed. Too detailed to just forget about. David looked at her sharply. You found the box. How did you get the key? Elena pulled out the pendant from under her shirt. You gave it to me. The day you left. You hid the key inside. David touched the pendant gently, his fingers brushing against hers. I wanted you to have a way to find me if you ever needed to. If something went wrong. But I never thought... You never thought I'd actually use it. An elder knocked on the door and entered. He was a dignified man with white hair and sharp eyes. He spoke in that old dialect Daniel had mentioned, and David responded fluently. This is Thomas, David translated for Elena. He's one of the community leaders. He wants to know if you've brought danger here. Elena looked at the old man. I didn't mean to. But yes, danger might be following us, David translated, and Thomas responded, his face grave. He says the council needs to meet, to decide what should be done. If the community is at risk, they may need to evacuate, find a new hiding place. After 300 years, Elena felt sick. I've destroyed everything by coming here. No, David said firmly. This was always going to happen eventually. We've been living on borrowed time. At least this way, we have warning. We can prepare. The council meeting was held that evening in a large central building. Elena and Daniel sat on the periphery, while the community members discussed their options in their ancient language. David translated quietly. Some wanted to stay and defend their home. Others wanted to pack up and disappear deeper into the wilderness. A few suggested finally revealing themselves to the world, getting legal protections before Meridian could act. The debate went on for hours. Elena watched these people who'd been nothing but an abstract concept just days ago. They were real, with real fears and real lives at stake, and she was the one who'd put them in danger. Finally, Thomas stood and spoke at length. When he finished, everyone was quiet. What did he say? Elena whispered to David. He said that hiding forever isn't living, that maybe it's time to stop running from the world and instead engage with it on their terms. But to do that, they need help. They need someone who understands both worlds. You and you, if you're willing. Elena looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked at David, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Not as the husband who'd abandoned her, but as someone who'd found his true calling. What exactly are you asking me? David knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I'm asking if you'd consider staying, helping us figure out how to protect this community legally, permanently. You're smart, capable, and you care about doing the right thing. Together, maybe we can find a way to save this place without destroying what makes it special. You want me to stay here? In the valley? Give up my life like you did? Not forever. Just long enough to help, to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Elena pulled her hands away and stood pacing. Everyone in the room was watching her, waiting for her answer. The weight of their hopes pressed down on her. I don't. know if I can forgive you yet, she said to David. I don't know if what we had can be fixed or if it's broken forever, but she looked around at the faces watching her. But these people don't deserve to lose everything because of corporate greed. So yes, I'll help. I'll stay as long as it takes to find a solution. The relief in the room was tangible. David smiled at her, and for a moment she saw the man she'd married all those years ago. Thank you, he said softly. That night, Elena was given a small house near David's. She lay on the simple bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened. She'd come here angry, hurt, desperate for answers. She'd found those answers, but they'd raised even more questions. Elena woke to the sound of shouting. For a moment she didn't know where she was, then everything came rushing back. The valley, the community, David. She rushed outside to find people running toward the tunnel entrance, pointing and yelling. Daniel found her in the chaos. They're here, he said, breathing hard. Meridian. They followed us somehow. Elena's blood turned to ice. How? We were so careful. The emergency beacon in the backpack. I forgot it was automatically transmitting our location. They must have been monitoring the signal. David appeared, his face grim. How many? At least 6 men that I could see from the entrance, armed. They're demanding we come out and talk. The council gathered quickly. Thomas spoke urgently, and the community began moving with practiced efficiency. This wasn't the first time they'd prepared to disappear, Elena realized. They had plans for this. They're going to evacuate, David explained. There's another tunnel system that leads to a different exit miles away. But it will take time to get everyone through, especially the children and elderly. Then we need to buy them that time, Elena said. David looked at her. Elena, these people are dangerous. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. I led them here. That makes it my responsibility. She turned to Daniel. You should go with the community. Guide them out. And what are you going to do? Talk to them, negotiate, give everyone time to escape. They won't just talk. They'll try to force you to reveal the location of the valley. Then I'll have to be convincing. David grabbed her arm. Elena, I can't lose you again. Not like this. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the fear in his eyes. He'd given up everything to protect these people, and now she was doing the same thing. You won't lose me. But David, these people need to get away safely. That's what matters most right now. David nodded slowly, understanding. Give us 2 hours. That's all we need. Then that's what I'll give you. Elena walked toward the tunnel entrance, her heart pounding. Daniel followed despite her protests, and she was secretly grateful not to face this alone. The men from Meridian were waiting outside the entrance, dressed in expensive outdoor gear and carrying equipment that looked military grade. The leader was a man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive watch. Mrs. Moretti, he said as Elena emerged. We've been looking for you. I'm sure you have. Though I'm wondering how you found me. Technology is a wonderful thing. Your emergency beacon has been broadcasting your location for days. We've just been following at a distance, waiting to see where you'd lead us. Elena felt foolish. Of course they'd been tracked. She'd been so focused on the maps and coordinates that she'd forgotten about modern surveillance. What do you want? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I think you know. This valley you've found, it's on land that Meridian owns mineral rights to. We've been searching for the exact location of certain geological features for years. Features your late husband discovered and then tried to hide from us. My husband is dead. The man smiled. Is he? Then who's that man I saw inside the valley? The one who looks remarkably like the photos we have of David Moretti? Elena's stomach dropped. They'd seen David, which meant they knew everything. What we have here is simple, the man continued. You and your husband committed fraud. You filed false death reports, stole company research, and concealed valuable information. Those are serious crimes. However, Meridian is willing to forget all of that in exchange for cooperation. What kind of cooperation? Full access to the valley, complete geological surveys, rights to extract any minerals we find, and documentation of the community living there. We're prepared to be generous. We'll resettle them somewhere comfortable, even pay them for their cooperation. You mean destroy their home and turn them into a curiosity for your profit? I mean bring them into the 21st century. Really, Mrs. Moretti, you should be thanking us. These people are living in poverty, cut off from modern medicine, education, technology. We'd be helping them. Elena laughed bitterly. They chose this life. They don't want your help. They don't get to choose. This is private property and they're squatters. Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can cooperate, show us the full extent of the valley, introduce us to the community. Or we can go in by force and you can face criminal charges. Elena glanced back at the tunnel. How much time had passed? 20 minutes? Not nearly enough. I need to think about it, she said. This is a big decision. You have 5 minutes. Then we're coming in whether you cooperate or not. Elena and Daniel moved back into the tunnel out of earshot. We need more time, Elena whispered urgently. I know, but how? Elena thought fast.
Then she had an idea.
A terrible, risky idea, but possibly the only one that would work. The coordinates, she said. I tell them they're hidden somewhere else. Lead them on a chase away from here. Give David and the others time to evacuate and hide the entrance. Elena, they'll be furious when they realize you're lying. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, those people in there need to get to safety. That's all that matters. She walked back out to face the Meridian team. I'll cooperate, she said. But the detailed coordinates aren't here. David hid them in another location. Insurance in case something happened to him. If you want them, you'll need to come with me. The leader studied her face. Where? There's a cave system about 5 miles east of here. That's where he hid everything. Maps, research notes, geological samples. Everything you need. It was a complete lie. There was no cave, no hidden cache. But she said it with enough confidence that the man seemed to believe her. Fine. You'll take us there, but leave your friend here as insurance. If you're lying, he pays the price. Elena looked at Daniel, who nodded slightly. They both knew this was dangerous, but it was the only way. Deal. Elena led 4 of the men away from the valley, hiking in the opposite direction of the real location. She moved slowly, claiming the terrain was difficult, that she needed to find landmarks. All the while, her mind calculated how much time was passing. 30 minutes, 45, an hour, how much further? The leader demanded. Not far, just over this ridge, but when they crested the ridge, there was nothing. No cave, no cache, no coordinates. The man grabbed Elena's arm roughly. You lied. Yes, I did. And by now, everyone in that valley is long gone. The entrance is hidden. You'll never find it again, even if you search for years. His face went red with fury. You just made a very big mistake, Mrs. Moretti. No, I made the right choice. Those people deserve to live their lives in peace, and I'm not going to help you destroy that. He pulled out his phone, presumably to call the men he'd left behind. But this deep in the mountains, there was no signal. He swore viciously. We're going back. Now. They marched back to the valley, the men angry and Elena terrified of what they might do. But when they arrived, the tunnel entrance was deserted. Daniel was gone, along with any sign that people had ever been there. The men searched frantically but found nothing. The community had covered their tracks perfectly, making the valley look like just another empty mountain meadow. Even David's house had been dismantled, the stones scattered to look natural. Where are they? The leader demanded, shaking Elena. Gone. Hidden somewhere you'll never find them. They've had 300 years to perfect the art of disappearing. You think your technology and money can beat that? The man's face was twisted with rage, but there was nothing he could do. Without evidence, without coordinates, without any proof the community existed, Meridian had nothing. This isn't over, he threatened. We'll bring legal action. We'll have you arrested for fraud for obstruction. Try it. I'd love to see you explain to a judge how you're trying to exploit a protected archaeological site and displace indigenous people. The media would have a field day. They stood there in a standoff until finally the Meridian team had no choice but to leave. They had no proof, no evidence, nothing to justify staying. Elena watched them hike away, her legs shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. She'd done it. She'd bought enough time, but now she was alone in an empty valley with no idea where David and the others had gone. She sat down on a rock and waited. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Just when she was starting to panic, Daniel emerged from behind a rock face she would have sworn was solid. You did it, he said, grinning. They're all safe. Come on, I'll take you to them. He led her through a hidden passage she never would have found on her own. It opened into a smaller valley, more remote and even better hidden than the first. The community was there, setting up temporary shelters. David saw her and ran over, pulling her into a tight embrace. You were incredible, he said. Brave and smart and everything I remembered. I was terrified, Elena admitted, but you did it anyway. That's what makes you brave. That night the community gathered around a fire, Thomas stood and spoke, his voice carrying across the group. David translated. He says you've proven yourself a true protector, that you sacrificed your safety for people you barely knew. He's asking if you'll stay permanently, help them navigate the modern world so this never happens again. Elena looked at the faces around the fire, people who'd welcomed her, trusted her, accepted her as one of their own despite everything. Then she looked at David. 5 years ago, he'd made an impossible choice. Now it was her turn.